The phone rang in the silence of my office on Tuesday morning. As I spent 3 hours trying to pore over the dry columns of quarterly reports, the light was blinding, pouring down from the 40th floor, and somewhere below, the city I had largely tamed bustled. The intercom on my desk clicked hoarsely, and my assistant's voice, always measured and impeccable, broke my concentration. "Mr. Sterling, this is a call from the wedding agency Elegant Events, line 2. My first instinct was to brush it off. Weddings. My world now consisted of assets, acquisitions, and balance sheets, but something clicked in the back of my mind, an image, the joyful, slightly goofy face of Marcus, my younger brother, 6 months ago, his words that he and Jennifer might not be able to afford the wedding of their dreams, and my decision, quiet, anonymous, 50,000, a simple transfer, no fanfare, no expectation of gratitude, so that my brother would have his perfect day. So that the family who always put him first wouldn't know this gift was from me, the eternal disappointment. I sighed and pressed the button. David Sterling speaking. The voice on the other end of the line, Amanda, was professional, but beneath the veneer, something else was audible, a slight but distinct tremor, like a string tautened to its limit. "Mr. Sterling, this is Amanda from Elegant Events. I'm calling about Henderson and Miller's wedding next month." Henderson, my mother's maiden name, so they were the ones speaking, not Marcus. "I have some unfortunate news regarding your invitation." I slowly put my pen down. It landed on the glass tabletop with a dull, final thud. "Go on." Pause. I could almost hear her searching for words. "Your family contacted us yesterday. They asked that you be removed from the guest list entirely. They said there was a family dispute and specifically requested that you not attend either the ceremony or the reception." A blow, a quiet, visceral one, the kind that doesn't make you scream, but simply takes your breath away for a second, as if someone had ripped a chunk of air from your chest. I looked out the window at the silhouettes of skyscrapers, half of which worked for me in one way or another, and felt a strange, chilling emptiness, but my voice was even, steely, accustomed to command. "I see." But Amanda didn't finish. Her voice quickened, as if she wanted to spit out the worst and run. "They also asked if they could keep the $50,000 deposit you paid for the event. Mrs. Henderson said the family had already spent that money on other wedding expenses." Silence, deep, all-consuming. In it, I heard only the ticking of the expensive Swiss watch on my wrist and the distant hum of the city at my feet. Money. They hadn't simply cut me off. They had decided to confiscate my silent blessing, to appropriate it, to make it their own. Still gazing at that cityscape, my $3.8 billion empire, of which they had no clue, I felt something inside me break, not painfully, but with a cold, clear snap. "Mr. Sterling, are you there?" "Yes," I said, my voice calm, almost thoughtful. "I want you to cancel the entire wedding." "Excuse me, what?" Her professionalism cracked. "Cancel Henderson and Miller's wedding? The whole thing? The venue, the catering, the flowers, everything?" Panic, genuine and uncontrollable, seeped into her tone. "Sir, I don't understand. You're not the groom, you can't just—" "Amanda," I interrupted, gently but firmly, "what's the name of your company?" "Elegant Events Wedding Planning," she answered automatically. "And who owns Elegant Events?" There was a confused shuffling of papers, a quick search through the database. Sterling Event Holdings." "And who owns Sterling Event Holdings?" The pause grew longer, more drawn out. I could almost see her reading what she'd found and turning pale. "Sterling Hospitality Group." "Correct, and I'm David Sterling, CEO and sole owner of Sterling Hospitality Group, so yes, I can call off this wedding. Actually, let me clarify." I stood up and walked to the window. My voice had quieted, but every word fell like sharpened steel. "Also, cancel their reservation at the Grand Harbor Hotel. That's mine, too, and Symphonic Catering is mine, too. The floral arrangements from Premier Botanical are mine. The photography from Lens and Light Studios is mine, too." "Mr. Sterling, I had no idea you—" "There's more, Amanda. The bachelor party reservations at Harborview Resort, mine. The rehearsal dinner at Coastal Elite, mine. Even the limo service they booked through Prestige Transportation, mine." A heavy, almost asthmatic sigh came from the other end of the line. Her small, orderly world had just collapsed. But sir, the wedding is in 3 weeks. 200 invited guests, deposits paid. Cancel everything, refund any deposits paid by guests for their stay, send the Henderson and Miller families an invoice for the full amount they owe, minus my initial $50,000 deposit, which I'm holding as a cancellation fee. Mr. Sterling, this will ruin the wedding, there's no way they'll find other vendors this close to the date. That's no longer my problem. I hung up, not dropped, but carefully placed it on the base, then I leaned back in the leather chair, and the silence of the office fell upon me with all its weight. 28 years, for 28 years they'd seen a loser, a student who ran away from Harvard, squandering his future. They didn't know I'd run away to my future, that their disappointment was my fuel. The phone on the desk vibrated, dancing across the glass. Text, Mom. David, we need to talk about your recent behavior. Your attitude toward Marcus and Jennifer is unacceptable. We believe it's best for you not to attend the wedding. We'll keep the money you contributed, as we've already spent it. I smiled, dryly, without warmth. My fingers habitually tapped out a reply. Understood, have a nice holiday. And sent it. What didn't they know? They didn't know absolutely everything. 8 years, for 8 years, I built this quietly, methodically, at night, while they slept the peaceful sleep of those confident in their superiority. I dropped out of Harvard not because of failure, but because of an epiphany. The luxury events market was dormant, and I saw a hole I could break into. While they shook their heads, seeing my departure as capitulation, I abandoned their well-worn path to steer onto my own uncharted highway. Sterling Events was born in a one-room hellscape reeking of cheap noodles and insomnia, 18 hours a day, a couch you couldn't stretch out on, their comments at rare dinners. Is David still into his passion? Marcus, by the way, got a job at the best law firm in town. I bought my first venue 2 years later. It was small and broke. To them, I was still playing business. By the 4th year, I had 6 venues in 3 states, and Sterling Hospitality Group was born. I started buying everything: catering, flowers, music, transportation. I created an ecosystem where every dollar stayed in my pocket. They'd ask at Thanksgiving, "How are your holidays going?" and then immediately steer the conversation to Marcus's successes. When I acquired Grand Harbor, I merely mentioned that I work with hotels. They nodded with polite indifference. Years 6 and 7 were a time of acquisitions, recessions, crises. I picked up what others had lost and made it shine again. Harborview Resort, Coastal Elite, names they breathed out, unaware that they were being spoken by my quiet, disappointing son. The empire grew in the shadow of their ignorance, and today, the shadow decided to reveal its true form. The silence that followed the call to Amanda was thick and heavy, like before a thunderstorm. I tried to focus on the numbers in the report, but the black lines blurred before my eyes. Everything inside me burned with the cold, pure fire of resentment that had been building for years and had finally found its outlet. 30 minutes, exactly 30 minutes later, the phone rang again, breaking the artificial silence. Father appeared on the screen. I stared at the pulsating icon, feeling my heart beat steadily and strongly somewhere in my throat. I picked up the phone. David, his voice broke into the air, confused, disoriented, lacking its usual commanding firmness. Some woman just called me and said our wedding venue was cancelled. There must have been some kind of mistake. A mistake. My whole world was one big mistake to him. I took a slow breath. No mistake, Dad. What do you mean, no mistake? His voice grew stronger, the familiar notes of a father irritated by disobedience creeping into it. This is ridiculous. We have a contract. A contract with Sterling Event Holdings, which is owned by Sterling Hospitality Group, which I own. There was silence on the line, not just a pause, but a thick, hollow emptiness in which I seemed to hear his entire understanding of the world and his eldest son cracking and collapsing. I almost felt sorry for him, almost. David, what are you talking about? I closed my eyes, something inside me trembled, but my voice remained steely. I'm talking about you disinviting me from my own brother's wedding. Having asked to keep the $50,000 I paid for it, I cancelled everything else. He tried to seize the initiative, but it was already pathetic babble. You paid for the wedding? Everything, Dad, the venue, the catering, the hotel rooms, the flowers, the photography, the rehearsal dinner. the bachelor party, the transportation, it all went through the companies I own. I allowed myself a pause, letting every word sink in. Congratulations, you just fired the man who paid for your son's entire wedding. Silence again, this time a heavy, hissing sigh mingled with it, then a whisper, a muffled argument in the background. Mom must have been standing nearby. David, I think there's a misunderstanding, he said again, but his voice no longer held any conviction, only a frightened attempt to get everything back. There's no misunderstanding. You've made it clear I'm not welcome at family events, therefore, my companies are also not welcome as event providers. David, what companies? His voice broke into a cry of confusion. You plan parties. A bitter, caustic laugh rose in his throat. After all this, after 8 years, billions, an entire empire built from nothing, he still saw me at a table with balloons. Dad, I own Sterling Hospitality Group. We control 47 venues, 23 restaurants, 12 hotels, 6 catering companies, and 11 event providers in 7 states. Our revenue last year was $1.2 billion. That's impossible, he whispered, his voice became quiet, old. Check it. I said it mercilessly, coldly, check our corporate website, check the business registry. Check out the Forbes list of the fastest growing private companies, we were 17th last year. Again the whisper, more agitated this time, then the phone seemed to be intercepted. My mother's voice, always so confident and gently instructive, now trembled and cracked. David, came the voice on the other end, we didn't know you were successful, you never told us. And that sentence finished me off, not their ignorance, but their blindness. I tried to tell you. My voice finally cracked, bitterness breaking through. At every family gathering for the last 8 years, I've tried to share what I'm building. Remember when I mentioned buying Harborview Resort? You said it was good that I was busy. When I told you about expanding into hotels, you asked when I was going to get a real job. But, you dropped out of Harvard to build this empire. I saw an opportunity and I took it. While Marcus was studying contract law, I was drafting contracts that made millions. I was building something real. My father cleared his throat, returning to the conversation. A new, unfamiliar note crept into his tone, ingratiating. David, of course we can work something out, discuss it. Marcus's wedding is no longer my concern. You dismissed me, remember? You made it clear that my presence would somehow mar your perfect family celebration. We didn't know. You didn't know because you never bothered to truly listen to what I had to say. My voice grew stronger, filled with the power of the truth I'd carried within me for so long. You saw a Harvard dropout and decided I was a failure, you never looked deeper. At that moment, the phone on the table vibrated again. Amanda. The case, the reality. Dad, I need to answer. David, wait, he pleaded, but I'd already switched to the other line. Amanda. Mr. Sterling, her voice bordered on panic, I've been getting calls all morning, your brother, your parents, even the bride's family, everyone's asking about rebooking, and, sir, with 3 weeks' notice, that's impossible, all the quality venues in the region are fully booked, catering companies are booked with other events, there are simply no available alternatives. I looked out the window, at my city. What about Grandview Manor? That. She hesitated, that's your property too, sir. And it's already booked for this weekend, right? Well, her voice turned pitiful, then they'll have to think of something else. Mr. Sterling, your mother called in tears, she said 200 people are invited, relatives flying in from all over the country, she's begging for any solution. I thought about it, tears, pleading, words that should have touched me, but they only cooled my resolve. Any solution? Yes, sir, any solution. Okay, here's what we'll do. I stated it clearly, as if dictating the terms of surrender. They can have the wedding at Grandview Manor, my smallest venue, the banquet capacity is 80 people maximum. Basic catering package, simple flowers, in-house photographer only, total cost, $200,000, payable in advance. Sir, her voice broke, that's 4 times what they were paying before, and half the space. That's the offer, they wanted to exclude me from their celebration, but keep my money, now they can include me in the decision-making process, paying market rates, and if they refuse, they can get married at City Hall. I hung up before she could object. I returned to the report. The numbers finally became clear. 3 hours passed, 3 hours of silence, save for the nervous calls from unknown numbers, which I ignored. Then my secretary's direct extension rang, and a second later, a call came on my cell phone. It was Marcus. I sighed and answered. "David, what the hell is going on?" His voice burst into my ear, filled with uncontrollable rage and panic. "You're getting married, congratulations," I said calmly. "Don't play games with me," he screamed. "Mom's been crying all day, Dad's had 6 phone calls with different suppliers, and they all keep telling him you own their companies. What kind of sick joke is this?" "It's not a joke, Marcus, this is business." "Business?" He snorted so hard the microphone distorted the sound. "It's my wedding." "Your wedding, which I financed, your wedding, from which I was excluded, your wedding, which your family decided I wasn't worthy of attending. We thought it was best." He began, but his voice trailed off. "You thought it was best to exclude your brother from the most important day of his life, while secretly keeping the money he contributed? Does this sound like family behavior to you?" Marcus fell silent, his heavy breathing was audible in the silence. "We didn't know the money was from you. Mom asked me for help 6 months ago," I said, staring at a spot on the wall. "She said you were having trouble with the wedding expenses, and Jennifer's family couldn't contribute much. I wrote a check for $50,000 that same day." "David, I didn't know." "You didn't know because you never asked." The bitterness returned, sharp and salty, "just like you never asked about my business, my life, or anything else. You just assumed I was a family failure and moved on." "That's not true," he tried to protest, but his voice was devoid of strength. "Marcus, when was the last time you asked me a sincere question about my life?" I asked quietly, almost wearily. "When have any of you ever shown any real interest in what I do?" There was silence on the line, not just a pause, but a heavy, oppressive silence, in which I could hear the grinding of the gears in my brother's brain as he tried to digest it all. I gave him time, then I continued, calmly and clearly, as if I were negotiating business, which, in essence, they were. "I'll offer you a deal," I said, my voice ringing out in the quiet of the office like a death sentence. "You can have the wedding at one of my venues, but I want 3 things: an official, recorded apology from the entire family, a public, family-wide admission that you underestimated me, that you were blind, and the reinstatement of my invitation, not out of politeness, not because it's the right thing to do, but because you sincerely, truly want me there." "David, of course we want you there," Marcus blurted out hastily, but his voice was hollow, a rehearsed phrase. "Do you want that?" I asked mercilessly, "or do you want my money there? For the playground, food, and flowers to magically reappear?" "It's not fair," he whispered, and in his tone I heard the same boy who always knew his parents were on his side. "Fair?" I barely suppressed a bitter chuckle. "You excluded your own brother from your wedding, while quietly keeping his financial contribution. Explain to me, Marcus, what's fair about that? Where was your fairness in this?" Marcus sighed heavily, like a man carrying an unbearable weight. "What if we don't agree to your terms? Then you'll figure out how to hold the wedding with 3 weeks' notice and without a single industry hitch." My words were cold and precise. "Good luck with that, sincerely, and if you agree, you'll get married in a beautiful, if not the most luxurious, venue, with impeccable service, and your brother will be by your side that day, just like a normal family should be. I need to talk to Jennifer, and to our parents." "Of course I do," I agreed and hung up. That same evening, as the lights of my city began to appear outside my window, the phone rang again, an unfamiliar number. I answered. "David, it's Jennifer, I think we need to talk." Her voice was even, but there was a steely thread of determination in it that didn't sound like the panicked shriek I was expecting. "Congratulations on your engagement," I said neutrally. "Thank you." She paused briefly. "Look, I didn't know anything about this. Marcus never told me you helped with expenses, and I certainly didn't know about the scale of your businesses." "Most people don't know," I shrugged, though she didn't see it. I spent the whole day researching Sterling Hospitality Group. It's huge. You own half the venues I used to dream of having my wedding at as a child, looking through magazines. There was something like bitter surprise in her voice. The last few years have been great, I stated dryly. David, I owe you an apology, we all do. She spoke firmly, without hesitation. I was there, in that room, when your parents decided not to invite you. I should have stood up for you, I didn't. Why? I asked bluntly, honestly? Because. She hesitated, and for the first time uncertainty crept into her voice. Because all these years, Marcus portrayed you as an irresponsible older brother who never came to his senses, and I believed him, and now I realize that Marcus doesn't really know you at all, none of them do. She paused, and I heard real emotion in her voice, not just a pretense, regret and shame. David, I would be honored to have you at our wedding, not because of your business or your money, but because you're Marcus's brother, and because you clearly care about family more than the others, realized. What does Marcus say? I asked, ignoring her, for now. Marcus is processing the information, he's in shock. He realizes his older brother isn't the man he thought he was all these years. It's turning a lot of things upside down. And your parents? I asked. They're scared. They treated you like a family disappointment for years, and now they find out you're probably the most successful person in any room they've ever entered. Success isn't just about money, Jennifer. No, she quickly agreed, but respect should be about recognizing when someone deserves it, and you've obviously deserved it for a very, very long time. The next day, before noon, Amanda called. Her voice no longer sounded panicked, but rather respectful, even obsequious. Mr. Sterling, your family has accepted your terms. They've paid a full deposit for the basic package at Grandview Manor and have formally, in writing, requested that your invitation be reinstated. I have the letter in the mail. They agreed to all the conditions? All three? I repeated. Yes, sir. She paused. Your father specifically asked me to tell you that the family would like to meet with you before the wedding to offer a formal, personal apology, and your brother, he wants to know if you would agree to be his best man. I leaned back in my chair, looking again at the familiar city skyline outside the window. 8 years of building an empire out of dust and ambition, while my family saw only dust and failure. 8 years of cautiously trying to share my success, while they heard only excuses. 8 years of proving to myself my worth, while they patiently waited for me to finally grow up and understand my insignificance. Amanda, I said quietly. Yes, sir. Tell them the meeting will take place, set it for this Saturday. At the Harborview Resort, in my private banquet room on the top floor, and, Amanda. Yes? Make sure the catering is impeccable, the very best, wine from my private cellar. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. on Saturday. I arrived an hour early to check everything out for myself. The room was exactly as I'd envisioned it, the epitome of luxury they couldn't possibly achieve. I stood by the enormous floor-to-ceiling panoramic windows, gazing out at the endless blue of the harbor. This resort had been my biggest and boldest purchase, a distressed, nearly bankrupt property that I'd transformed into the crown jewel of the coast. This private room alone, with its Italian marble and crystal chandeliers, was worth more than my parents' and Marcus's homes combined. They arrived together, right on time. Mom, Dad, Marcus, and Jennifer. My butler opened the door. They entered and paused on the threshold, looking around the room with mute, stunned amazement. Mom's eyes slid over the sparkling chandeliers, the hand-carved dark oak furniture, the carpet that sank her feet. Their gazes were glued to the view stretching for miles across the water. David, my father finally managed, stepping forward and formally extending his hand. His hand was slightly damp. Thank you for meeting with us. Have a seat, I nodded, shaking his hand briefly and stiffly. They sat around the enormous mahogany table, on which the finest china and bohemian crystal glasses were already set, as silent as shadows. The waiters began serving lunch prepared by the same kitchen that catered for gubernatorial receptions and private soirees for movie stars. This place, it's incredible, my mother said quietly, almost in a whisper, her eyes fixed on the napkin folded into an intricate swan. I had no idea, she added, finally looking at me. It's mine, I reminded her. I mentioned buying the resort 3 years ago. At your birthday party, you said I was expanding my business. I continued, looking her straight in the eye. That's what it was, expanding. My father cleared his throat and put down his fork, his face was pale. David, we owe you an apology, a thorough one, and that's why we're here. Go on, I said, leaning back in my chair. My posture was open, but my face remained an impenetrable mask. We misjudged you. For years, we only saw what we expected to see, a dropout. Instead of what was really going on, we were blind. Marcus leaned forward, his fingers knotted in a white knot on the table. David, I'm sorry I didn't notice your accomplishments, for thinking you were irresponsible. That, you let your family exclude you from my wedding, it's vile, it's despicable, I don't know how to fix it. I looked at him, this grown boy, my brother, and for the first time in years, I didn't see him as a rival, but simply as a confused man. Why? I asked again, but without the previous harshness. Why did you think I was irresponsible? Because you dropped out of Harvard, he blurted out, like a long-rehearsed mantra, because you never had a normal, traditional job with business cards and pension plans, because you never bragged, you didn't flaunt your success, you just kept quiet. Would bragging have helped? Marcus? I asked, and for the first time, my voice sounded not anger, but weariness, endless, 8-year-old weariness. If I showed up to family dinners in an expensive suit and spouted off revenue figures? Would you have listened? Or would you have dismissed this as another of my foolish attempts to appear important? I smiled faintly, not a cheerful smile, but a sad one, laced with 8 years of quiet despair. Marcus, I told you 3 years ago, at the Christmas table, that I'd bought a chain of hotels on the coast, remember? You took a sip of wine, said, "That's nice, David," and instantly changed the subject to your latest law firm win. You didn't even hear the rest of it. I didn't understand you meant you owned them, he muttered, looking at the table. What did you think I meant? I asked quietly, that I was working part-time as a receptionist? He didn't have an answer, his confidence, always so unshakable, cracked and crumbled. Jennifer intervened in the silence that hung over the exquisite dishes. Her voice was quiet but firm, like a bridge she was trying to build across a chasm. David, I think we'd all like to start over, a clean slate, all of us. We want to know about your life, your business, your plans. We want to be a real family, if you'll give us another chance, of course. And if I weren't rich? I asked, looking from her to my father, to my mother. What if I still worked 18 hours a day, but ended up barely making ends meet? What then? Would you still want to start over? My father didn't lower his gaze, he answered honestly, and that honesty carried its own bitter price. Then we'd probably continue to underestimate you, to consider your tenacity stubborn, your dreams childish. That's the shame, son. At least you're honest, I nodded, and something in my chest tightened painfully. Tears welled up in my mother's eyes, not theatrical ones, but quiet, shameful ones. David, I'm proud of you, proud of what you've built, it's incredible, but more than that, her voice wavered, I'm proud that you still wanted to help with the wedding, despite everything, despite the way we treated you all these years. You're my family, I said simply, and the words finally sounded less like an accusation than a statement of fact. It matters to me, even when it seems it no longer matters to you. Marcus stood up, the chair creaked on the marble, he approached me, and I could see how difficult it was for him, how unfamiliar this movement was, to bridge the gap between us. David, I know I don't deserve it, but I want to ask again, will you be my best man? I looked at him, at my little brother, the golden child who walked the beaten path, never turning back, never taking risks, never building anything out of nothing, and for the first time, in his eyes, always so self-assured, I saw doubt, confusion, and respect that was finally directed not at my wallet, but at me. He finally saw me, clearer than ever. Marcus, I said, my throat tightening for a moment, I would be honored. The wedding took place 3 weeks later at Grandview Manor. Even though it was my smallest venue, it was still the epitome of elegant luxury, panoramic windows overlooking the endless coastline, gardens whose photographs had appeared in architectural magazines, my family, who had once disparaged my small event planning business, now watched in mute amazement as my impeccably trained staff worked their magic. Everything was flawless, perfect, the way only I and my team knew how. During the best man speech, I rose, lightly clinked my knife against my glass, a hush fell over the room, I looked around at the 200 guests, I saw curiosity in their eyes, heard the same whispers that had been swirling around the room all evening, about the groom's mysterious brother, about the suddenly discovered empire. When Marcus and I were kids, I began, my voice carrying confidently through the hall, he always looked up to me, wherever I went, he trotted along, somewhere along the way, that changed. I met my brother's gaze, sitting next to Jennifer, he began to see me as a brother who had chosen the wrong path. Who had given up on conventional, predictable success. I paused, letting the words sink in, especially the four seated at the head table. What Marcus didn't understand, what, I confess, I perhaps didn't fully understand myself back then, is that I never gave up on success, I just defined it differently. Success isn't about perfectly living up to other people's expectations, it's about finding the courage to build something meaningful, with your own hands, with your own dreams, and then, sharing it with the people you love, even if it takes them a while to see it. I raised my glass, and the room, as one, rose to its feet. To Marcus and Jennifer. May you build something equally beautiful and lasting together, and may you always remember that the most important, the most valuable achievements in life are those you share with your family. Later, when the dancing was in full swing and night had enveloped the gardens, my father found me on the terrace, I was leaning against the railing, listening to the distant sound of the surf. "David, I have a question," he said, approaching. "Of course, Dad." "Why?" he asked simply, and that single word conveyed all his confusion. "Why didn't you just tell us?" Directly, bluntly, why did you let us think you were wasting away all these years? I stared at the dark water for a long time, pondering my answer. Because, Dad, I've tried to tell you, in many ways. But more than that. I wanted you to be proud of me for who I am, not for what I possessed. I wanted you to see for yourself, without prompting, that my leaving Harvard wasn't a defeat, but a choice, that building something from scratch, with your own efforts, is true value, true achievement. And he swallowed, we failed that unspoken test of yours. Yes, I quietly agreed, we failed, but you passed a test that, as I now see it, was more important. Which one, he sincerely didn't understand. Today, when you had a choice, to wallow in your resentment, your embarrassment, your wounded pride, or to come here, to your son's wedding, arranged by someone you didn't value, you chose family. When you realized you were wrong, you found the strength to admit it, to me, to yourself. This is worth more than years of belated recognition and praise. My father silently placed a heavy, warm hand on my shoulder, the gesture spoke louder than words. I'm proud of you, son. He said it with difficulty, but he said it, not just for your success, but for your character. You had every reason to leave this family forever, to write us off, and you saved your brother's wedding instead. Family is family, Dad. I turned to him, and the same tears glistened in the corners of his eyes as in mine, even when it acts not quite like family. Late that night, already behind the wheel, the city lights flickering outside the window, I reflected on the past 8 years, how I built my empire before the eyes of a family that watched but was blind, a Harvard dropout who became what he is, a planner of small parties who created a dynasty, a perpetual family disappointment that turned out to be their invisible foundation. The phone, lying on the passenger seat, vibrated softly, a text from Marcus. Thank you for today, for everything. I'm sorry it took me so long to finally see who you really are. I'm incredibly lucky to have you as a brother. I smiled as I stopped at a traffic light, the dim light from the street light fell on the screen. I typed back. Welcome to the family business. Because that, ultimately, was the whole point, not just building companies and making fortunes, but building something that can survive hurt feelings, misunderstandings, and years of quiet estrangement, something that can ultimately bring the family back together. It's just that, like me, it took them a while to realize that. The next morning, I woke not to an alarm clock, but to the quiet beeping of my phone, 17 missed calls, 43 messages. The wedding, as expected, exploded on social media, photos of the venue, the exquisite reception, the magic we created, but I scrolled through it all. Far more important were the other messages. From Mom, thank you for the most wonderful day of our boy's life. When are you coming to dinner? I'll make your favorite pie. From Dad, I have a business matter I need to consult. How about lunch on Wednesday? From Jennifer, you were right, this is more important than money. Thank you for being our best man. And from Marcus, already in the morning, coffee? No business talk, just like brothers. On Monday morning, sitting in my office on the 40th floor, I looked out at the waking city skyline, which I had once only dreamed of conquering, and now was partly shaping, and I realized something I hadn't realized all these 8 years of persistent, lonely work. Success isn't about finally proving to those who didn't believe in you that they were blind and stupid, not about that bitter, lonely sweetness of triumph. Success is finding the strength to continue loving them, even when they're wrong, even when their misunderstanding cuts to the quick, and sometimes, if you have the patience not to slam the door shut completely, if you leave a crack in it, they, in due course, begin to see the light themselves, and then everything that was built takes on a new, most important meaning, the meaning of home, which, as it turns out, I've been building all this time.